We got a Rams-Vikings Wild Card round mega preview. That's coming up next on this crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, Rams fans? What is up, Ramley? What is up, Vikings fans? And welcome to a crossover edition, a wild card round crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings, your daily podcast covering your Rams, your Vikings. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, Bleacher Report, SI, do NFL radio for Westwood One. And of course, I'm joined by Luke Braun, the host of Locked On Vikings. You can follow him on X at Luke Braun NFL. And we are diving into this matchup, Vikings-Rams wild card round. We're going to break it all down. But first, today's episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Prize Picks. This crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Luke, so I'm in California. I'm in LA. You're in LA. Kind of first thing to talk about, of course, is these fires, the devastation that's kind of ravaged the Southland. And we're thinking about everyone that has been impacted, of course, with a Locked On Clippers host. He has lost his whole home growing up. I mean, it's a lot of devastation out there. So in our thoughts and kind of looking into this matchup as it stands right now, I mean, just kind of the big storyline for the Rams is really, can the Rams offense come alive? I mean, you look at this Rams team, last 3 games with Matthew Stafford under center, they've scored 12 points, 19 points, and 13 points. They're averaging 21.6 points per game. That's 20th in the NFL. Teams that average around 22 in the playoffs since 2009 are 14-5. So really, if you kind of get to that number, you feel like you have a good chance. But really, the number one storyline for the Rams is kind of which Matthew Stafford shows up and which Rams offense shows up.
Yeah, so I'm curious about like what happened here, because when like the last time I saw you, the Rams offense was clicking, firing on all cylinders. Brian Flores actually said that like the fact that Puka Nacua, they kind of didn't think he was going to play, and they were a little surprised and they were caught out by that, so they weren't really ready to defend him, and it showed. He popped off in that game. So what I saw of this offense was like this very like on time, in rhythm, very well executed thing, and it just hasn't been that way in the last few games. Jimmy Garoppolo notwithstanding, but in the Stafford games, why?
Yeah, I mean, really, what it's come down to is two things have worked for the Rams offense of late. And really, that's been to run the football and the screen game and the production of Puka Nacua. And that's also kind of what hurts this team, is that Cooper Kupp is someone that has really been one of the best receivers for a long, long time, but he's not that WR1. He's not that Triple Crown, perennial Pro Bowl level Cooper Kupp that we've seen. He hasn't been that guy for a minute now. And you just look at his overall production and just where it's been in this stretch where the Rams have struggled. I mean, he had no catches against the 49ers in week 15. He had 3 for 24 against the Jets, and he had 1 catch for 29 yards against the Arizona Cardinals. So he has really gone through this cold stretch. Last 3 games, I mean, 4 catches for 53 yards, no touchdowns. And then they really haven't explored the other options, right? Demarcus Robinson, who has been big in certain points of this season, and Jordan Whittington, he flashed in the last game. He really hasn't been getting the targets that he was when Puka and Cooper were out. Tyler Higbee, their tight end, did come back, and they really haven't had a lot of production from their tight ends this season to kind of feel good about. But really, you just haven't had the best version of Matthew Stafford as well. I mean, just more an accurate version of Matthew Stafford that's really not been on his A game of late. And you combine the fact that they're really basically going to one weapon for the majority of the time with Puka Nacua. They're just more limited right now than they've been.
So with Stafford specifically, he's been inaccurate. How does that respond with pressure? The Vikings got like no pressure on Matthew Stafford last time, and it's because he got the ball out quickly and accurately, and he was where he was supposed to be. Plus, a couple of high-profile moments like that touchdown where he scrambled around and kind of, vintage Stafford stuff. But is he still, able to time it out quick and he's just missing the balls, or is pressure causing him to throw off platforms in ways that maybe he can't do the way he used to?
There has been some of that, but for the most part this season, 103.2 pass rating when he's been blitzed this year. That's ninth best in the NFL, 8 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in those situations. He definitely has come through in situations where he has been pressured, but really to me, it's a combination of just the lack of downfield opportunities for him. And just look, I mean, sometimes Matthew Stafford comes out there and you say, okay, this is still a top 3 to 5 quarterback in the NFL, even at his age. And sometimes there's just some missed throws, just some overthrows that he'd like to have back, that he's honest about wanting to have back in the post game. And it's kind of one of those things, I think, with Matthew Stafford, where, look, he's had such a long career. He's played in every game imaginable on the biggest stages. If you're a Rams fan, I think you kind of look at this as, look, the lights are bright. He's had a lot of success at SoFi Stadium throughout his career in playoff games. He's kind of one of those guys that things start to click when you need it to click. And I think that just the juice of the playoffs is going to bring the best out of Matthew Stafford. And I think that it's not one of those things where, oh, the arm strength isn't there or he lost his fastball or anything like that. I think it's just one of those things where, look, he's a veteran quarterback that has had some injuries on the offensive line this season to his receiving core. I think there's been moments where he haven't run the football enough. But look, the truth is with Stafford in a playoff game, if you keep him upright and you get these guys in good advantageous situations, he can still produce. Now, coming up, though, we're going to talk about Sam Darnold, though. Sam Darnold.
Yeah, speaking of the juice and pressure of the playoffs.
And we're going to hit that up after the break. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year, the Rolling Stones, SoFi Stadium. It was electric. The energy, the excitement, it was unforgettable. Now, Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to the Rose Bowl. Using the Gametime app, it was easy. With Gametime Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. The super deal is particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings. Welcome to the show. By the way, shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings. Cannot thank you enough. If you haven't yet joined that Everyday Listeners Club, just watch and listen to every single episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings. All right, Luke, picking up here in our second segment. Now we're going to talk about the Vikings QB1 in Sam Darnold. Just the year he's had. Just one of the surprise resurgent seasons really in the National Football League. You had this Vikings team go out there and draft JJ McCarthy. He gets injured. You trade or you don't bring back a Kirk Cousins. He ends up with the Falcons, and it looked like he was going to be a stopgap type of quarterback for this organization, and he turns out to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this season.
Yeah, so for interested SoCal folks in Sam Darnold's future, right now, my understanding is for most of the year, and especially headed into the year, the plan with Darnold was that he was going to be a bridge. He was going to start for as long as he starts, and when J.J. McCarthy was ready, he would take the mantle. Obviously, McCarthy gets injured, things change. Okay, this whole year is now the Sam Darnold year, and I think the idea was, if he plays well, he probably gets expensive, and we're not going to pay a quarterback, a 5-year, $40 million, $50 million deal. That's not really in our plans with a rookie here. So they were still going to kind of let him walk and say, well, we get a comp pick. But I think now that it's real and crucially it's emotional between Kevin O'Connell and Sam Darnold, their relationship is really strong and they mean something to each other. they're starting to talk about the tag and maybe other options or other stopgap deals. The problem is if you enter a real contract negotiation with Sam Darnold, there's going to be a lot of space between what the Vikings are willing to do and what Sam Darnold very deservedly is going to ask for. So you've got to clear that space. But he's played good quarterback. He's coming off of probably his worst game of the year, maybe second worst game of the year of coming off the Lions. And the key thing is that game had an NFC championship vibe to it. That game I've never felt a regular season game that had that kind of pomp and circumstance, that kind of electricity to it. Ford Field was rocking. Everything was crazy. But it just felt like it had that pressure. And Sam Darnold was sailing passes. The timing was off. Everything was off. Rams fans, listen to my episode yesterday on Locked On Vikings, where I talked about in the second segment. I talked in a lot more detail about what did go wrong with Sam Darnold. But you can chalk it up to the lights were bright and he choked. So now it's a playoff game. The lights are pretty bright here, arguably brighter. Then it felt like it kind of felt like an NFC championship, and this is a wild card game. I don't know. The vibes were very weird last week, very unorthodox. But it's still, it's playoffs, right? It's win or go home. Sam Darnold's never played in the playoffs before. So can he pull it together? And here's the really intriguing part. If the Vikings lose, if Sam Darnold lays an egg and the Vikings lose and they're out, and this whole magical Darnold season ended with lay an egg in primetime, lay an egg on Monday night in the wild card game, I think that changes quite a bit about contractually what the Vikings are willing to do with Darnold and greatly raises the chances that he leaves, that the Vikings just let him walk and then he's going to the Raiders or the Giants or whoever wants to take him.
Yeah, I just think that things happen so quickly, right? The NFL comes at you fast, and does it really become a storyline where you had this magical surprise season, you had a passer rating higher than Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels and Justin Herbert and all these guys heading into the final week of the season, and then you turn into a pumpkin, and then you lose the final two games, and all of a sudden you're back into being this NFL journeyman once again.
Yeah, you're like one and done, and then you become the next maybe Geno Smith is what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or Baker Mayfield, because I think Baker Mayfield had his renaissance with you guys, and it was short, and it was at the end of that one season. And then he gets a deal with Tampa and it works out and he kind of finds his place there. But, the Rams were never going to be his place because they had Stafford in place. So it's interesting, like the situation the Vikings were in, they weren't really ready for like paying a quarterback to be their franchise guy. They're ready to have a rookie quarterback be their franchise guy. And by all accounts, even if they sign Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy still is the long-term plan A. But it's hard to let him go because these guys just care about each other a lot.
Yeah, I think what really stood out to me just rewatching that Detroit game is Aaron Glenn's entire scheme against him. You had heavy blitzes, a lot of pressure. You had really good coverage on guys. And even when guys were open, he was running around the pocket, really couldn't get and execute those throws off. But the Rams aren't a team that really does that, right? They're not a team that is going to be as heavy blitz as the Lions were last week. They're more of a bend but don't break style under Chris Shula. So it's kind of one of those things where if you're Sam Darnold and you're kind of going against that Lions team, the Lions hangover is real, right? Teams that have played the Lions have lost.
Got them on a short week on it last time, and you saw how it ended. Yeah,
it could happen again. But as far as the defense of the Lions, what was it specifically in your mind that really led to the worst game of the season for Darnold?
So teams all year have been sending 6 or 7. When you send like 0 blitzes, like really a lot of guys, 6 or 7 guys, we're not talking about one extra dude off the edge. The Vikings can sort that out okay. But we're talking lots of extra guys. That has given the Vikings offense problems, but it's complicated. Sam Darnold has been all year long one of the best quarterbacks against the blitz in EPA per play. I think he's like 3rd right now, and that's including the disaster Lions game that sunk him a little bit. He's been one of the best quarterbacks against the blitz. He's been able to avoid pressure, keep his feet separated, rescue pockets, deliver balls downfield. And so with that Lions, like if you watch that Lions tape, there were a lot of 0 blitzes with guys running open downfield, but Darnold fell apart. He couldn't hit him. The throws were inaccurate. He couldn't find it. He would turn him down. His brain wasn't working. He would find him, but too slow. And then the pressure's there. He can't throw it the way he wants to. So That is a plan. I watching the whole Vikings season, I think that's the best idea against Sam Darnold. Send 7, do cover 0, hope he falls apart. Arizona got away with that for 3 quarters, had a great game against them. Lions got him twice with that. So you can do that, but it's hard. It's risky. And if that's not your identity, then maybe that's not your move. But I think if it's more about sitting back in zones and hoping you can bracket guys and hoping you can kind of outthink Kevin O'Connell, you are kind of coming up against the tip of the spear of the Vikings. I think that's sort of attacking the thing that they're best at rather than the thing that they're worst at, which offensively I would say is protecting the quarterback against, and picking up really hard blitzes. The thing they're worst at is operating quickly. So if you can force the Vikings to quicken, then you can get them to kind of be at their worst. But if you let things go for a long time and you say, we're just going to cover and we're going to be safe, 4 or 5 seconds into the play, really bad things start happening to you. And that's been the story of a lot of the Vikings' 14 wins.
Yeah, and you look at just the production, too, in the red zone. I mean, they had 9 pass attempts at the 7-yard line or closer.
Yeah.
He was 1 for 9 in those situations. And the one...
Same thing in the Rams game. The red zone, when they lose, it's crazy red zone futility.
Yeah, and if you're the Rams, can we replicate that? I mean, it's tough to beat a team twice in a season, especially in the National Football League. But I think where the Rams are at in this one is, look, you have to expect Sam Darnold to play better, right? You have to expect a better version of that Vikings team that lost to the Lions in their season finale. And I think this is the first 14-win team of the wild card round, and they won 14 games for a reason. I do think, though, kind of where they're at as a 14-win team, if you're a Rams group, if you're Rams fans, this is kind of one of the more less intimidating 14-win teams just because you beat them earlier in the season because they're coming off that bad loss, but it's not a reason to take them lightly.
Yeah, and it's first 14-win team that's going on the road and all that, and I think that honestly, after getting swept by the Lions, I had a whole rant about this, but I think that it's appropriate that if you can't, if you can't win one of the two against your division rival, and that division rival wins the division, they earn the home game. But look, we can get into some of the more specific things because I do have other questions about how the Rams plan to handle things like Justin Jefferson or a heavy blitz scheme, or maybe not a heavy blitz scheme, which is what they got last time, and what the Vikings defense did last time. I mean, they were. That was the game where I think they made the most mental mistakes all year long. And maybe that's Thursday night, Lions hangover, West Coast time zone stuff, but some of those things still apply. And maybe we get weird travel because of the fires. So some of those things will still apply, but I'm curious to kind of dive into that more with you from a matchup perspective.
And we're going to hit that next, coming up next on a crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are just better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Right now, the Rams 2.5-point underdogs against the 14-win Vikings. And the Rams are a plus 3,000 to win the Super Bowl. So you can go over to FanDuel, get all the odds, all the latest stats and info. You can find it over at FanDuel.com to join today. Go to FanDuel.com and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And welcome back to Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings. So here in our third segment, talk more about these matchups, talk more about this game. I think for me, if you're a Rams fan, kind of one thing you've been screaming at your TV the entire season is you want to run the football, you want to establish the run. And kind of one thing I want to hit too is just the Rams' ability to run the football against this Vikings defense that has a lot of 100 rushing yards in 5 of their last 6 games. You look at where Kyren Williams he looks like he could be due for a big game against the Vikings. 5 of their last 6 opponents have rushed for 100 yards, with 3 of those, Cardinals, Falcons, and Lions, at least 150. Since week 13, the Vikings ranked 17th in rush EPA after they were first for weeks 1 through 12. So how do you make sense of kind of the Vikings run defense at this stage of the season? What's really changed since the first part of the year?
So losing Ivan Pace was a lot of that. They lost Ivan Pace. I think it was week 12 when they lost Ivan Pace, and then they had Kama Hill and Josh Metellus and stuff. Having all those guys, they're healthy with the linebackers. It makes such a difference. You can see in the Packers game that the which is one of the best rush teams in the league, and Josh Jacobs was, I would say, contained. I think he ended up with like 60 some yards. It was fine. That mattered a lot, and that was when Ivan Pace came back. So that probably explains. I think that explains a lot of those. Not having those two linebackers for a lot of the season has hurt them, but they have them now. Cashman and Pace are both healthy and both slated to start. And then obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs getting 4 touchdowns on him is pretty frustrating. But the Lions ran on him the first time too, and I think you can, it's the Lions. They got out physicaled, and they don't usually get out physicaled out front that way. I would say Harrison Phillips has been declining all year long. I think he might be getting a little long in the tooth, and they've gotten a little less out of explosiveness out of somebody like Jonathan Bullard as the season has kind of worn on. But on the flip side, they've sort of had a low-key break. I don't even want to say breakout because he's a rotational player, but they've gotten flashes, maybe I'll say, from Jalen Redmond, who we didn't even think was going to make the team. And was sort of a depth guy. He's replacing Taki Taimani, who had that rotational role, but he's on IR now. So that sort of front seven has given you a lot, but it kind of depends on what the Rams want to do with Kyron Williams. If you want to run up the middle, I think you'll have more success than running to the edges, because Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard, in terms of setting those edges, are absolutely and utterly insane. A lot of this is Kyron Williams is going to have to read that, find an edge that doesn't look the way he likes, cut back, find the right gap and all that stuff, sort it all out, be patient at the right time, be decisive and fast and bursty at the right time. And some running backs can't do that. But if you want to talk about what's kind of sunk them from the best rush defense in the league, which they were for the first half of the season, to a little bit more average, getting a little bit less at a couple of those guys up front. But I think the main culprit is losing Ivan Pace for a lot of that, and they do have him back.
Yeah, and that's really going to be a big key to their success. And of course, from the Rams standpoint, it's Justin Jefferson. I mean, I think you kind of start right there and try to limit these big plays, those big explosive plays, because that's an area where the Vikings can have an advantage. Jefferson, at least 20 yards on 27.2% of his catches this year. It's the 7th best in the National Football League. And the Rams, that's a problem area. They allow the 5th highest rate of 20-yard receptions to their opponents this season. And that's something that's always going to be a cause for concern, because Justin Jefferson is someone that it's not about stopping him. It's just trying to limit the damage as much as humanly possible. And just going back and breaking down the film of the Vikings loss to the Lions in Week 18, one of the first questions I had was, how did the Lions defend Justin Jefferson? Because you look at his line, you look at the box score, 3 catches for 54 yards. Compare that to 8 catches for 115 yards that he had against the Rams in Week 8. Well, how did the Lions do that? How did they accomplish that? And it was clear that Amik Robertson was defending him all night long. He was matched up against him. He was following him around the field. He was guarding him on 35, his 43 routes on the night. And it was clear that one of the reasons why they were having success against Justin Jefferson was the pressure that was presented by the Lions. The Lions getting to Darnold, making things difficult, because by the time that Darnold had Justin Jefferson open, it was too late. He was either rushed out of the pocket, uncomfortable, making missed throws, and he was getting sacked, and he just was not able to get comfortable or in a rhythm, and a lot of it had to do with the pressure. So if you bring pressure and you get home to Sam Darnold, it makes things a lot more difficult against Jefferson, because the other option is you bracket him. And when you do that, then you can get yourself into some trouble, because Jordan Addison, leading up to last week, he was really hot for them, making a lot of plays, very productive. You give him single coverage. You give him opportunities. And if it's not him, TJ Hawkinson, their dynamic tight end, who did not play the first time these two teams met earlier in the season, he's back. You give him more opportunities. So that really is the ultimate conundrum when you're guarding Justin Jefferson. If you bracket him, you open things up, and you make things easier, the best way to defend him is, can you get pressure on Sam Darnold? And that'll go a big way to determine if the Rams can slow things down for Justin Jefferson.
So it sounds like we're zoning off or bracketing. That's going to be the plan. So when that happens, when other teams have done that all year long, their quarters and cover 2 and stuff, that kind of has meant Jordan Addison gets 150 yards, TJ Hawkinson gets 100 yards. Like that's those other guys pop off. And the best way to defend Justin Jefferson that I've seen other teams employ is to get really physical with him in man coverage, and eat your flags sometimes. And just kind of mug him and beat him up. And it works against Jordan Addison too. He's a smaller receiver. So teams have been really physical on the Vikings and kind of have taken their flags in stride. And it's led the Vikings to be like way out in front, lead the league in like penalty yardage because you get DPIs that obviously skews that. But it's kind of just the way that teams want to defend the Vikings. And everybody says, yeah, we'll take a couple of DPIs and hopefully that sort of stymies these guys. But it sounds like you're not thinking about doing that. You're thinking more about playing spatially. And I'm telling you, if it becomes down to a chess match of who can better navigate spatially a field with Justin Jefferson on it and the gravity that he has, I've seen teams do that a lot this year, and those are the games where Sam Darnold throws for 350 yards.
And that's the challenge, and that really is a scenario where it's kind of a personnel thing from the Rams standpoint. Is you really can't take that bait if you're them and defend him like that. And we saw kind of in the first matchup too. It's like you need to know that you're going to produce on your offensive side of the football as well. And I think, look, if you're Sam Darnold, if you're Justin Jefferson, I mean, you mentioned Jordan Addison, another USC guy. I mean, DJ Hawkinson back. I mean, they have weapons, and I don't think that you're going to completely stop and neutralize this Vikings offense with their right. And look, you got Cam Akers, former Ram there. You got Aaron Jones, former Ram there. But I think that what has worked for this Rams team all season long is playing their style and not tailoring it to one player particularly, and just hoping that the bend but don't break style is effective enough to allow the offense to really put up points. I mean, what's really interesting too about this matchup is just a lot of just polar opposites with these groups. I mean, look at the Rams. First quarter, one of the worst in the NFL, 1.8 points per game. It's 31st. The Vikings, on the other hand, is second best, 6.4 points per first quarter. So getting out to a really strong start. I mean, you saw in the first matchup, the Vikings outscored the Rams 14-7 in the first quarter. They scored 2 touchdowns in their first 2 drives. So I think
they went touchdown.
So I think that you are a Vikings team. You're going to look to get explosive early, and a lot of that is taking advantage of those playmakers you do have.
Yeah, and while we have time, I want to flip to the other side too, because the Vikings' whole philosophy is aggression. This is just a team that is built on aggression. They're built on aggressively pushing the ball downfield on offense, shot plays all the time, but defensively, it's Brian Flores, right? It's blitzing and all that. So with the way that Stafford has been playing, like his response to the blitzes last time was to get the ball out quickly, and they did a good job of pushing the ball downfield and not contracting. Is that still the way that Matt Stafford does this? And do we trust this offense right now to get the ball out quickly, not just to checkdowns in the flat to Kyron Williams? The Vikings know how to do that, but to get the ball out to Puka Nacua on a basic and execute that tightly and quickly enough to really beat these blitzes, but not have to change your offensive philosophy over it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the game plan is going to be similar in a lot of different ways. I mean, you've seen them have success with screen passes. You've seen them have success with jet sweeps. I think one thing that Rams fans are going to be looking at early is if Cooper Kupp isn't getting separation, if he's just out there being a run blocker and maybe a guy that occasionally moves the chains, and the Rams need points, and let's say the Vikings get off to a good start like we saw. Do you insert Jordan Whittington, who had a really nice game in the season finale, who has played well in his opportunities? Do you throw him into the mix as another weapon if the emphasis
is he a receiver? Jordan Whittington?
Yeah, Jordan Whittington, receiver out of Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, he's someone that's like he can impact the game as a kick returner. He's big physical receiver, strong hands, and kind of fits the mold of a Rams receiver. But I do think that is going to be the game plan. And like you mentioned, the blitz heavy style of the Vikings, the ability to get turnovers. I think with Matthew Stafford, there comes a point when the guns gets a little gunslinger. If you fall behind early in games, you want to get it all back in a hurry and push the ball downfield. But when we've seen this offense click at their best with this version of Matthew Stafford, it's when there is a balance with the run game, with this offensive line that is more of a road grade style gap duo, with the re-emphasis on just being big and physical with Kyron Williams as your running back, and just kind of mixing things up with Tyler Higbee being back, another little safety valve for Matthew Stafford. I think, too, you just can't turn the ball over. I mean, we mentioned these polar opposites between these two teams. The first quarter scoring, turnovers as well. I mean, the Vikings, 33 turnovers this season. That leads the NFL. The Vikings have 24 interceptions, 5 more than any other team. The Rams have 23 interceptions in the last 2 years combined. So not turning the ball over, playing clean on offense is going to go very far to determine if the Rams ultimately win this game at home. And you have to play the style that has led to being the surprise NFC West champions. And that's by not doing too much. And we've seen that have success this season.
Yeah. I mean, turnovers, it always comes down to turnovers, right? And for the Vikings, they have sort of cleaned up their giveaways issue over the last couple of months. Sam Darnold hasn't thrown too many interceptions. I think he's got 2 or 3 since like week 12 or something like that. And one of them came on a 4th down that he was just throwing it up, and it was actually better than taking a sack because it was 4th. But so he's been playing a lot cleaner brand of football. They've had a little fumbleitis sometimes here and there. But I think things have like normalized in terms of their giveaways, but they're still generating a lot of takeaways. And the reason they generate takeaways is because they put a lot of pressure on you. They confuse the picture. They muddy it. A lot of their takeaways look like the one Matt Stafford threw to Byron Murphy in the last game, where it was kind of a late down. He was just throwing one up, big overthrow, and it falls in the bucket. They just track the rainbow. And you got to not do that. And maybe that means eating your sack and playing more conservatively or something like that. But yeah, it is a difference in styles. It sounds like the Rams are a lot more about conservative, sound, execute, do your thing, and be efficient. Whereas the Vikings are all about hunting that one explosive and famine, feast.
No doubt about it. Yeah. And another point about that efficiency is getting it done early in series. Another polar opposite, this Rams team convert 36.8% of the third downs this season. That's the 4th lowest in the National Football League. And you look at where the Vikings are at, they're at 35.6% and stopping teams on third down. So that's the 4th lowest in the NFL. So they've done really good in that department, actually first in stopping teams on 4th down. So if you're the Rams team, the last thing you want to do is put yourself in 3rd and long situations, forcing into obvious passing downs. And then you get aggressive, turnovers can happen. So that's
where the bad stuff happens. Yep.
That's where the bad stuff happens. And I think that is kind of the matchup. That what makes this matchup a very fascinating one is it almost feels like the Rams are a little more conservative in their style and what they're really trying to do on both sides of the football, but they know that is what works when everything is well executed. Where the Vikings, there's a little more of high variance heading into this matchup, but it's definitely
that's the way it should be, right? I mean, you should take who you are and what your team is and what your team has been successful being, take that into the playoffs and, see where the chips fall. And I think both these teams are going to do that. Yeah. And we'll see what happens.
Exactly. I think it's honestly, look, it's Monday night for a reason, right? We know that the eyeballs are going to be on SoFi Stadium. And I think that the Vikings have had a pretty surprising season. I mean, 14 wins with Sam Darnold, right? And then no one expected the Rams to win the NFC West. It was supposed to be the 49ers.
Especially when they were 1-4, yeah.
Seahawks. So, look, I think the Rams are kind of playing with a little bit of house money, right? But then the Vikings, I think that the most intriguing thing storyline-wise is the whole looming thing with J.J. McCarthy and Sam Darnold and the future of that organization and how important a playoff win would mean for both these franchises. Look, I mean, the truth of the matter is on the Rams side is if they get blown out or they lose this game and Matthew Stafford at this stage of his career, the way his contract is structured, they have an out as well. But it's going to be a very impactful game, meaningful game. I know that you don't want to throw out your prediction. I think I'm going to keep mine as well. Think about, especially because it's a Monday Night Football game. We have plenty of time to kind of jangle that care and think about that one for a little bit. But hey, good luck. I know you're going to be at SoFi. I'm going to be at SoFi. We'll meet up. Maybe we'll do a little short with our iPhones or something.
We got to do it.
A crossover short, the first crossover short in Locked On NFL history. That'd be fun. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.
And as always, Skull.
There we go. As always, Skull. I love it. All right, guys. See you next time.